Good evening, my dear night travelers. I'm so glad you found your way back to our little corner of the dark. Here, the candlelight is always warm, the tea is always ready, and the shadows, well, they have their own stories to tell. Tonight, we're taking a journey through Georgia. Not the Georgia you know from postcards and sunny afternoons, but the Georgia that only wakes when the moon rises. These are the 5 most haunted places in Georgia, each carrying whispers from the past, and some that never stopped walking among us. Hold on to your blanket, pour yourself something warm, and lean in close, because the night is just beginning. The Sorrelweed House looms over Madison Square like an elegant ghost from another era. By day, its grand Greek Revival architecture draws tourists and photographers, its ochre walls glowing warmly in the Savannah sun. But when evening falls and the shadows lengthen, that same warmth twists into something else, a suffocating heaviness that seems to cling to the air. Locals say this house has soaked up every tragedy that's unfolded within its walls, and it releases them in whispers, chills, and fleeting glimpses of the dead. Built in the early 1840s for wealthy shipping merchant Francis Sorrel, the home was the stage for high society gatherings and opulent parties. Guests sipped brandy under glittering chandeliers, their laughter spilling into the night. But beneath that polished surface, darker stories brood. The most infamous centers on Francis's wife, Matilda. Accounts differ, but the tale most often told is one of heartbreak and betrayal. Matilda allegedly discovered that her husband was having an affair with Molly, an enslaved young woman who worked in the home. The revelation shattered her. One night, in a fit of despair, Matilda is said to have thrown herself from the balcony, her body hitting the stone courtyard below. Within weeks, Molly was found dead in the carriage house, hanging from a noose. Visitors today speak of sudden waves of sadness that seem to come from nowhere. Tour guides report guests breaking down in tears mid-tour, their emotions shifting without explanation. The faint sound of sobbing drifts through the upper hallways, sometimes followed by the sharp click of heels on hardwood floors, though no living person is there to make the noise. And then there's the perfume. Witnesses swear they've smelled an overpowering, sweet floral fragrance, like something a wealthy woman of the 19th century might have worn lingering in empty rooms. Paranormal investigators have made the Sorrelweed House a regular stop. Teams have captured electronic voice phenomena, whispered words, anguished cries, and even what sounds like a woman calling out the name Francis. Shadow figures appear on thermal cameras, darting between rooms, too quick for the eye, but solid enough to block light. In the dim glow of candlelit ghost tours, some guests claim they've seen faces in mirrors that aren't their own. One, in particular, described as pale, beautiful, and twisted in pain before fading away. The carriage house, where Molly's body was found, is perhaps the most unsettling spot. Many say they feel physically ill upon stepping inside, lightheaded, nauseous, or overcome with dread. Some have stumbled out, gasping for air, insisting they could feel a presence pressing in on them, as if unseen hands were pushing against their chest. Guides offer one final piece of advice to the curious. If while wandering the Sorrelweed House, you feel a cold hand rest gently on your shoulder, don't turn around. Whatever is reaching for you may not want to let go. The past in this house is not gone, it's alive, restless, and waiting for the next person willing to step into its shadows. Old Candler Hospital stands in Savannah like a monument to both healing and death. Its stately exterior hiding stories far darker than its elegant architecture suggests. Established in 1804, it is the oldest hospital in Georgia and one of the oldest in the United States, still in operation in some form. Its long history of medical breakthroughs, wartime service, and epidemic care has left behind more than just records in dusty archives. It has left an echo, an imprint of every life and death that passed through its halls. Beneath the manicured lawns and weathered walls lies one of Savannah's oldest cemeteries. Many of the earliest patients never left the grounds, their bodies interred just steps from the wards where they drew their last breaths. As the years went on, the hospital expanded, and with each addition came new shadows, new whispers, and a deeper sense. One of the most haunting features is the tunnel system beneath the hospital. leading from the morgue all the way to Forsyth Park. The tunnels were built for a grim but practical purpose. During the devastating yellow fever epidemics of the 19th century, bodies piled up faster than the city could bury them. The disease brought panic, and officials feared that seeing the dead would send Savannah into chaos. Under the cover of night, corpses were quietly wheeled through these underground passages to their final resting places, away from the eyes of the living. Even today, those who have ventured into the tunnels speak of a suffocating heaviness in the air, as if the very walls remember the fear and grief of those dark nights. Some claim to hear the rumble of phantom wheels echoing through the passageways. Though no carts have passed through in over a century, others speak of muffled cries or faint coughing remnants of the suffering that once filled the hospital above. Over the decades, countless nurses, doctors, and patients have reported strange occurrences inside Old Candler Hospital. Nurses working the night shift tell of footsteps in the halls when no one is there. The sound of soft-soled shoes stopping just outside their door before vanishing. In some wards, patients have awoken to find a figure leaning over their bed, a tall man in a white coat, his expression unreadable in the dim light. These ghostly physicians never speak, but the moment the lights are switched on, they are gone. Some of the strangest stories involve rooms long closed to the public. In one particular wing, sealed off decades ago due to disrepair, security guards have reported hearing metal instruments clattering to the floor. When they check, the room is empty, its dust undisturbed. A few have even claimed to hear the faint sound of voices speaking in urgent, clipped tones, the way doctors might during an operation, before the noise fades into silence. The most chilling account comes from a local photographer who was granted rare permission to explore parts of the hospital for a historical project. While setting up his camera in one of the old surgical suites, he took a test shot of the empty room. When he developed the image, his hands trembled. There, in the center of the photograph, stood a man in a surgeon's coat, cap pulled low, his face partly shadowed. The figure's stance was rigid, his gloved hands poised as though ready for an operation. The photographer swore the room had been locked before he entered and that no one had been inside for decades. When he returned to check, the room was exactly as it had been, silent, empty, and still. Many believe the spirits of Old Candler Hospital are not malicious, but rather trapped in a cycle, replaying their duties or last moments over and over. The doctors and nurses who worked tirelessly through epidemics may linger out of a sense of unfinished work, while patients remain tethered to the place where they fought, sometimes in vain, for their lives. Others suggest the hospital's location, on top of a burial ground, has created a perfect storm for paranormal activity, with restless souls unable to move on. Today, much of the original building is preserved, its exterior a reminder of Savannah's deep history. Tour groups occasionally pass by, guides lowering their voices as they point toward the upper windows where some swear they've seen faces staring back. At night, the building takes on an entirely different character. The glow from the street lamps casts long shadows across its walls, and if you stand very still, you might hear the faint echo of footsteps in the darkened halls or the quiet squeak of a gurney's wheels moving through the tunnels below. Old Candler Hospital is more than a relic of medical history. It's a place where life and death have danced together for over 2 centuries, leaving an indelible mark on the air, the ground, and perhaps even time itself. For those who visit, it is not just a history that chills the blood, but the feeling that the dead are still waiting, watching, and walking the same corridors they once knew. The Moon River Brewing Company may be one of Savannah's favorite places for a cold drink today, but beneath its lively atmosphere lies nearly 2 centuries of dark history. The building's story begins in 1821, when it first opened as the City Hotel. In its prime, it was a center of activity, welcoming wealthy travelers arriving by steamboat, hosting rowdy gambling nights, and serving as a gathering place for locals looking for entertainment. But the same walls that heard laughter and clinking glasses also bore witness to drunken brawls, violent duels, and moments of desperation that would leave their mark forever. In those early days, The City Hotel was a hotspot for tensions between northern and southern patrons, and political disputes often turned deadly. One infamous incident involved a man being shot on the staircase after a heated argument, his blood seeping into the wood, staining it for years. Violence was not uncommon here, and many guests checked in never to leave again. During the Civil War, the building was repurposed as a makeshift hospital. The second and third floors became crowded wards filled with wounded soldiers, the air thick with the smell of blood and sickness. Nurses worked tirelessly under dim lamplight, tending to the injured, while doctors carried out amputations and emergency surgeries in rooms that had once been meant for fine dining. Many soldiers took their final breaths here, far from home, their bodies later stored in the cool basement until burial. It is this grim chapter that some believe opened the door to the hauntings that persist to this day. After the war, the building changed hands several times before falling into disrepair. For decades, it sat abandoned, its windows dark and its rooms filled with dust. But an empty building in Savannah is rarely truly empty. Those who ventured inside during those years told of cold drafts that seemed to come from nowhere, footsteps echoing in the silence, and voices whispering just out of earshot. Some even claimed to see shadowy figures moving past doorways, their forms vanishing the moment they were pursued. When the property was eventually restored and transformed into the Moon River Brewing Company, it quickly gained a reputation not just for its beer, but for its ghosts. Staff members have countless stories of strange occurrences. Glasses have been seen sliding across the bar on their own before crashing to the floor. Bottles rattle in place as if shaken by an unseen hand. More than one bartender has turned to scold a patron for tugging at their clothing, only to find the space behind them empty. One of the most notorious spirits said to haunt Moon River is known as Toby. No one knows exactly who Toby was in life. Some say a gambler from the City Hotel days. Others believe he was a patient in the Civil War hospital, but his presence is unmistakable. He is mischievous, fond of tugging on hair and clothing, and has been known to whisper people's names when no one else is nearby. Those who have heard his voice describe it as low and close, as though he were leaning in from just behind their shoulder. Once used as a morgue during the war, it is a place where the temperature seems to drop the moment you step inside. The air feels heavy, almost oppressive, and even the most skeptical visitors often admit to feeling uneasy there. Staff members are reluctant to go down alone, and with good reason. People who have braved the basement report hearing slow, deliberate footsteps pacing behind them, or the sound of heavy breathing just over their shoulder. Some emerge visibly shaken, their skin pale and clammy, insisting that something down there was watching them. Paranormal investigators have flocked to Moon River, and their findings only deepen the mystery. Recordings taken in the basement capture faint voices, sometimes calling out a name, other times murmuring phrases too quiet to fully make out. Infrared cameras have picked up strange mists forming and dissipating in seconds, and sudden temperature drops have been documented without any logical explanation. One team even caught a shadowy figure darting past a far wall, moving faster than any person could run before vanishing entirely. But the spirits of Moon River are not confined to the basement. On the upper floors, where soldiers once lay dying, some guests have reported waking in the night to see a man in tattered clothing standing at the foot of the bed. He says nothing, simply stares for a few moments before fading into the darkness. Others have seen a woman in a long dress gliding silently down the hallway, her face obscured by shadows. The staff, though used to the activity, still have moments that make their skin crawl. One waitress recalls carrying a tray of drinks to a table when she felt a sudden, sharp tug on her apron. When she turned, there was no one behind her. Another swears she heard someone call her name in a voice she recognized as her own. Grandmother Esu had been dead for years. Despite its ghostly reputation, Moon River Brewing Company remains a popular destination. Some patrons even come hoping for a paranormal encounter to go with their pint. Whether it's the thrill of history, the lure of a good ghost story, or the possibility of meeting Toby himself, the building continues to draw people in. And every so often, One of them leaves with a story they can't quite explain, a glass sliding off the table, a name whispered in their ear, a breath against their neck when no one was there. In Savannah, a city built on layers of history and mystery, Moon River Brewing Company stands out as a place where the past never really left. The beer may be fresh, but the spirits in the building are far older and they're not going anywhere. The Ellis Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia, wears its polished, modern facade like a mask, concealing a past so tragic that its echoes still seem to rattle the very walls. Long before it was a boutique destination for travelers, it was the Winnicott Hotel host to one of the darkest nights in American history. On December 7, 1946, the city awoke to horror. A fire had erupted in the Winnicott, and within minutes the building was engulfed. Guests, trapped in their rooms with no fire escapes and inadequate safety measures, faced an impossible choice: leap from the upper floors or be swallowed by the flames. Smoke poured from broken windows, and the screams could be heard for blocks. By the time the fire was contained, 119 souls had perished, making it the deadliest hotel fire in U.S. history. The building stood as a grim reminder for years before it was eventually renovated into what is now the Ellis Hotel. Developers brought in fresh paint, modern furnishings, and every comfort a guest could want. But some say the ghosts of that night refused to be sealed away behind drywall and wallpaper. Guests have reported waking in the dead of night to the acrid, unmistakable smell of smoke. They've risen in a panic, searching for alarms or flashing lights only to find the hallways silent, the air perfectly clear. Others claim they've heard the chaotic sound of running footsteps in the corridor, the pounding growing louder before fading into nothing. Staff say there's no one there when they investigate. Outside on the street, pedestrians have stopped and stared upward at the hotel's windows, convinced they've seen pale, desperate faces pressed against the glass. These apparitions seem to appear most often on the higher floors, sometimes in rooms that are vacant for the night. One chilling account came from a delivery driver who swore he saw a woman waving frantically from an upper window, her mouth moving as though she was screaming. He rushed inside to alert the staff, only to learn that no guest had been placed in that room. Inside, the upper floors are where the most unsettling stories come from. Housekeepers have refused to clean certain rooms unless accompanied by another staff member. Some say they hear a woman's voice calling softly sometimes, urgently for help from behind a locked door. But when they open it, the room is empty, perfectly in order, as if it hasn't been touched in days. One former night manager shared a story he kept to himself for years. He was making his final rounds when he noticed a figure at the far end of the hall, a woman in a long nightgown, her hair disheveled. She looked lost, almost in shock. He approached to see if she needed assistance, but with each step closer, the woman seemed to blur, then fade entirely before his eyes. When he asked security to review the hallway cameras, they found nothing. Some paranormal investigators believe the spirits are caught in a loop, reliving their final moments, searching for escape in a fire that no longer burns. Others think these are intelligent hauntings, souls aware of the living around them, reaching out in desperation. Even in its current luxury, the Ellis has spots where the past feels unbearably close. Guests who stay on certain upper floors describe a heaviness in the air, as though the walls themselves remember. Lights flicker without explanation, doors lock and unlock on their own. And more than one visitor has fled in the middle of the night, unwilling to spend another minute there. For those who know its history, the Ellis is more than just a hotel. It's a monument to a night of chaos, loss, and unanswered questions. The fire may have been extinguished decades ago, but in the whispers, the phantom footsteps, and the fleeting figures in the dark, it still burns. Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia, is known around the world for its haunting beauty. By day, sunlight filters through the branches of ancient oak trees, their limbs heavy with Spanish moss that sways in the slightest breeze. Marble angels stand watch over the departed, their faces carved with serene expressions, while winding paths meander between weathered tombstones and ornate family mausoleums. It is a place where history, art, and grief intertwine, a final resting place that feels both peaceful and heavy with memory. But when the sun sets and shadows stretch long across the grounds, that peace gives way to something more unsettling. One of the cemetery's most famous features was once the Bird Girl statue, made iconic when it appeared on the cover of John Beerant's Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. The statue, with her delicate, outstretched arms holding shallow bowls, seemed unassuming by day. Yet visitors swore that in the dim light of evening, her eyes would seem to shift, following them as they walked past. Some claimed her head would turn slightly, almost imperceptibly, to track their movement. Though the statue has since been moved for preservation, many still say they feel her presence, as if she remains tied to the place where she once stood. Among Bonaventure's countless graves, one draws more attention than any other, that of little Gracie Watson. Gracie was just 6 years old when she died in 1889, the beloved daughter of the manager of Savannah's Pulaski House Hotel. Her grave is marked by an astonishingly lifelike marble statue, sculpted from a photograph, capturing her wide-eyed innocence and sweet smile. Over the years, her resting place has become a shrine of sorts. Locals and tourists alike leave small toys, dolls, and candies for her. The offerings are tokens of remembrance, kindness, and perhaps caution. For decades, visitors have whispered about sightings of Gracie's ghost. Some claim to have seen a little girl in a white dress running between the tombstones, laughing softly, only for her to vanish into thin air. Others say they've caught her looking at them from behind the trunk of an old oak, peeking out with curious eyes. A few insist they've heard her giggle, the sound impossibly clear in the stillness of the cemetery. But there is a darker side to her legend. Locals warn that taking one of Gracie's toys is an invitation to misfortune. Stories abound of people who, out of curiosity or greed, pocketed a trinket from her grave, only to experience strange accidents or streaks of bad luck soon after. More than one such person has returned the item in desperation, hoping to undo whatever curse they had brought upon themselves. Bonaventure Cemetery is also home to more subtle hauntings, ones that stir the senses rather than the eyes. Many visitors report hearing faint strains of piano music drifting through the air, a melody both mournful and beautiful. The sound seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, carrying over the graves before fading into silence. No one has ever found the source. Some say it's the ghost of a young woman buried there who loved to play, her spirit still coaxing notes from an instrument that no longer exists. The air at night in Bonaventure has a way of pressing close, thick and unmoving, as if the whole cemetery is holding its breath. Where headstones tilt with age and roots have curled around the bases of monuments, visitors have seen fleeting figures out of the corner of their eyes, a man in an old-fashioned suit, a woman in a long black dress, but when they turn, there is no one there. Even seasoned locals admit the place can be unnerving. Groundskeepers have told of arriving early in the morning to find fresh footprints in the dew, leading between graves where no one should have been overnight. Sometimes they hear voices, a murmur of conversation, a faint laugh, but when they follow the sound, it stops abruptly. Perhaps what makes Bonaventure so eerie is the contrast between its beauty and its ghost stories. The greenery, the art, the history. It's a place that seems built for quiet reflection, but that same beauty takes on an entirely different character in darkness. The shadows hide things. The stillness feels unnatural. And the stories people tell about statues that watch, children who play among the dead, and music with no musician are not so easily dismissed. For those who believe, Bonaventure is a place where the past refuses to fade away. The people buried there lived lives full of love, loss, joy, and tragedy. If the tales are true, some of them still linger, not ready or perhaps not willing to leave. And for those who don't believe, even they can't deny that when the wind moves the moss just right and the moonlight spills across the graves, Bonaventure Cemetery feels like a place where anything could happen. My dear wanderers, the hour grows late. Georgia's haunted places will keep whispering long after we leave them tonight, but perhaps it's best not to listen too closely. The dead have their secrets, and they sometimes follow those who try to know too much. So, as you step back into the safety of your own world, check the corners of your room. Listen to the creak of the floorboards. And if you feel someone watching, just remember, might be a friend from tonight's journey. Sleep well, if you can. Until the next midnight, I'll be here, with the candle still burning.